So I want to do something a little bit different today. I want to do a little project, a little motion graphics project that can be kind of tackled in 30 minutes or so. And if this is the first time you've ever loaded up Blender, it's maybe not for you, but even if you've only got like a couple of days, a week's experience, you should be able to tackle this. And it's a nice project because it kind of covers animation, textures, rendering, different techniques. There's loads of stuff going on. So you're going to learn a few things. And the inspiration for this was, I did a project a while ago for a client who needed 20 or 30 motion graphics elements for their website. They wanted these kind of abstract, satisfying animations. So I started to learn different ways of producing them. And it's also just like, it's a big thing on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, that kind of satisfying animation. The scene, Corridor Crew, all sorts of people doing stuff around that. I'm not going to do anything quite so elaborate, but we should be able to do something that's kind of satisfying to watch, loop seamlessly, all within Blender, no add-ons, all done in about 30 minutes. So let's give it a go. Okay, so we're going to start with a new scene. I'm going to delete the cube and the light. We're not going to need them for this. We'll keep the camera. And then we're going to rotate to the top view. I'm going to hit Shift and A. And we're going to mesh, single vert, as single vert. And then I'm going to hit the G key to move it over to here. And then we're just going to start to extrude out a curved surface. Don't have to be super precise with this, and the shape doesn't really matter, but something that's going to look satisfying, locking and unlocking together. Okay, and then we're going to add our subdivision surface modifier. Bump this up to 3 in both, and I think that'll do the job for us. So now, still in the top view, we're going to use the Tab key, hit A to select all, E to extrude, and then press the Y key to lock it to this axis. I'm going to make this kind of snake shape. Okay, and I'm going to rotate the camera, and go into edge mode. I use the 2 key to select, and I'm going to Alt Shift on these edges. Hit E to extrude, then Z to lock it to the Z axis. Okay, I'm going to make this kind of shape, and I'm just going to sharpen up this edge. So we're going to hit Control A to apply our scale. Then Alt Shift on both of these edges, and then use the bevel tool and just kind of create that extra edge. And if I use the middle wheel on my mouse and make a third line in there, a third loop cut, and that gives us a nice sharp edge. Okay, right click, shade smooth. So that's going to be our basic shape that we're animating. The next thing I want to do is to make 20 of them. So add modifier, search, and we're going to add the array modifier in. And we're going to change the factor. It's not going to be on the X, it's going to be on the Y. And we're going to move this by clicking and holding down the Shift key. And we're just going to reduce that offset state together like this. Because it moves things later on when we apply it, we're just going to move it in a little bit tighter than we need. So like that. Okay, and I'm going to bump that count up to 20. And then before we go any further, I'm going to hit the F2 key and rename them. So they're just because I don't like having a bunch of things called Vert01. Now, we're going to create our animation. So I'm just going to pull up the animation window a little bit more. And we're going to bring up the item transform menu. And we're going to apply it. We're going to create the animation on everything, even though we're going to have these working separately. Eventually, it's easier to make everything start with and then offset it. So first thing we're going to do is pull the playhead back to 0. And then hit high. And in fact, I'm going to undo that because I want to hit I hovering in the main window, not over here. So we hit I and everything goes yellow, and we create a keyframe, which is locking that first bit of information in. And then we're going to pull the playhead to, let's say 70, and then I'll hit I again. So at the moment, we've got this solid bar, and that means that there's no movement between those frames. So what we're going to do now is move it to 30, and then hit G and Z, and we're going to pull it up and to around 2 meters. Doesn't have to be precise. That'll do for us for now. Then we're going to hit I again. You see the solid bar's gone now, and if I hit play, we have this very exciting animation. So I think we can make it a bit more interesting. The first thing I'm going to do is hold at the top. So we're going to select this keyframe, hit Control and C, move the playhead on a few frames, and then hit B. So now we have like a little pause at the top before it drops down. I'd also like it to drop down below 0, so you get like a kind of wave motion. So let's try it at 55, and we're just going to G and Z and pull it down to like -1.6. and then apply. That's what we've got now. So I to apply a keyframe. And it kind of goes up. I'd like this movement back up to be slower, maybe like 85. Let's try it again. And so it's like a nice sprung reset. I think that's looking good. And then before we go any further, we then want to duplicate this whole sequence. And we're going to start again at 100. So we're going to select everything. And then move our play head on. And drop it there. And then we're going to do the same thing at 200. And whilst we're here, we're going to increase the length of our animation to 400. Don't think we're going to need that, but it's a bit of safety net. So why have we done that? We want to make a perfectly looping animation. And this will become more obvious later on. But we're just trying to get as much work done now on all the objects to save us hassle later on. Okay, so now we're going to apply the array, and you can see for some reason it's just moved them very slightly, but it's still working for what we need. Now tab into edit mode, hit the A key, and then hit key, and choose by loose parts. And now we've got 20 individual curved panels. If we hit play, they should all still animate the same. Okay, great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work our way through and offset the animation by 5 frames. So this one is correct. If I select this one and then hit the A key, then the G key, all we're going to do is move forward by 5. So I now play back what we've got. You can see these first 2 are offset. When we do it on everything, we're going to have this really pleasing effect. So remove or select one, hit the A key, and this is now going to be at 10. So we're going up in increments of 5 each time. 15, what? And again, you can play around with this to get the effect that you want, but 25. So not super exciting, but I've already got confused which one we're at. So that was 30, it's 35. So just make sure each subsequent object starts 5 frames behind, and you can always just click back and check that you've got them right. So there should be 50, so we're halfway through now. 55. And you'll get faster at this. You'll develop a claw hand from repeating this sequence over and over again. I'm just checking that I haven't got too carried away. That's 70. Next one will be going to be 75. And next one's going to be 80. 85. 90, and then this last end should be 95. So now, if we play it back, all being well, that's really nice, the satisfying motion, and then it loops around. But we wanted to create a perfect loop, so what we can do now is we can change our start to 100 and our end to 100. And if I've done my maths right, this should now loop around seamlessly. Good job. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stop the animation, the spacebar, and then we're going to go to save as. And I like to name all of my files with a number at the end. So I've already done a practice run here. So now we have a number at the end. If I hit save incremental, it will automatically update by 1 number, so I can keep all of my old versions if I make any stupid mistakes. So I like to hit save every time I do anything major. Okay, so let's set up our camera now. So if we click the camera button, we do already have a camera in the scene. And I'm going to change the view, camera to view, and we're going to mess around with the camera positioning. Also, this is the time to decide what format you want to render for. So I want this to be a YouTube short. So that needs to be set to 1020 by 1920. So just hit the little printer button there. And you can set your screen size. And we're just going to turn off camera to view for a second and just pull out a little bit so that I can see my frame. And so now we're going to position, we want the camera at a point that we can see everything that's going on, but the entire image fills that. So we don't want any gaps to the back. So maybe it's always a little bit of, I want to zoom in a bit more. So at the moment that's not working because we can see an edge, which I don't want. So we're just going to zoom in a bit more. It's got the same problem still. So what we could also do is we could select all of these objects and scale out on the Y. No, we can't do that. Ignore that. And so we're just going to keep positioning our camera until we're in a place where we can see all of the steps, but so a bit of trial and error gets how you on. Cool, that should give us something interesting. And you can see now that it loops perfectly. And it creates this kind of slightly disturbing but slightly satisfying wobbling motion. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off camera to view now because I don't want to be able to move that by mistake. And also if we just click on the camera button here, which is viewport display, this section here that says passepartout, I don't know how you say that, it's totally fancy French. If we turn that all the way up, it'll black out. So this is giving us a view of everything we're going to get in the animation. And I've noticed that I've got a little, I think that is an edge that we don't want. So what we can do is, still using the camera view, we can actually shift over like that. And just check that we've got perfect. Okay, so we're just going to save incremental because I want to keep my camera set up there. So the next thing to look at is how we're going to do the shading of these objects to make it more interesting. So we're going to turn on viewport shading and we're going to select our first object and create a new material. And for now, we're just going to give it a color. Doesn't matter what color we go for. And we're going to select everything else and then make sure you first select everything else and then make sure Control click on the top to make sure you've got that one selected. And then we're going to hit Control and L and link materials. Everything should go. So we've all got the same material on it now. So I'm going to click the shading tab and we can work from this camera view for now. It shows everything we do. So what I want to do is give every object a slightly different shade of a material. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Shift and A, search, and we're going to choose object info. And there's a value here called random, which what it does is for each of these objects, it spits out a number and we can put that into a color ramp. So we'll connect the random to the factor. And then if I connect that to the base color, see what I mean? So it's created all of these different shades of gray, but we can then change these colors. Be more interesting. So let's go from maybe like a lime green for me, and then maybe a blue here. And you can move these gradients around. So if you wanted to have more green elements in there, or we can add another color in. So it's up to you to create the kind of gradient that you want for this. I think there's something in that. And if we now go back to our layout view, in our camera, you can see we've got the start of a material. So what I want to do is give these a kind of plastic glass type effect. And it's a little bit tricky to make in Blender. You're not going to use this material. We'll keep it for now, but we're just going to disconnect it. And we'll disconnect it from here, so everything should go black. And we're going to go search glass BDSF. And then we're also going to make a gloss BDSF. And then we're going to pull a line out of there and choose Mix Shader. I'm going to connect both of those together. And I want to set the values of this to maybe 0.5. And let's try a roughness of 0.2 for now. And then we need to make another glossy BDSF, so we'll just duplicate that. And let's try a roughness of 0.5. We're going to play around with all of these values. And then create another Mix Shader here. Connect these two together. And then this now needs to be connected to Before we go any further, we want to change our render to cycles and change this to GPU compute if you have a graphics card that can handle it. And so now we have this kind of grey material. And if I just play around with it's a little bit hard to see in this setting, but if I now connect my color ramp pin, so the more that we move the shader, the clearer it gets. And we're just going to connect our color ramp now into this color here. Now we've got a kind of gloss material. At the moment we don't have any lighting in the scene, so it looks a bit flat and lifeless at the moment. But we will play around with that next. So go back to our layout view and go into, so you see we've got the start of a glass material. Okay, so now we need to add some lighting, and the easiest way to do that is to create an HDR. And I have a little plugin for that, Easy HDR, which might be worth finding, but it's easy enough to do without. So at the moment our background is set to grey, and you can see if I just pull up the lighting, everything looks better, but it's too uniform. So we're going to change, cool, this is where I get confused. We're going to not click that button, we're going to click this button here, and we're going to choose environment texture. And I like to get my HDRs from Polyhaven. So if you go to polyhaven.com, there's a bunch of free HDRs. And they cover outdoor lighting. There's some good studio ones. I've been using this airport one quite a lot recently, and the Metro Nord. So grab one that looks interesting to you, and you might just experiment. And then when you pull them down, I have a folder for mine. So I'm going to use the airport one, see how it looks. And we're already looking better. Got kind of more interesting lighting going on. And if that's not working for you, you can try a different one until you get an effect that you like. So now we've got better lighting, we can play around with this slider till we get to the more glass-like finish that I want. And if you increase the roughness, you get like a more frosted Perspex type of finish. So I'm going to pull this right down there more. Do the same with this one. So we've got more like a glass kind of light effect. I'm just going to keep playing around with the values in here until I get a material I like. I think something like this is looking pretty good. And something I want to do that is maybe a bit advanced and not essential for this tutorial, so you can skip this part, is to just add some imperfections into the surface, some kind of scratches that just add a little bit of realism. So to do that, what we're going to need to do is first we need to UV unwrap each of these objects. So we have the UV editing tab, and then just selecting this one at the end, go tap into it, go to face mode and hit A, and we're going to choose UV unwrap angle based. And you can see it's kind of flattened it out so that we can apply textures to this. So unfortunately we now need to do this to all of these. So U to unwrap angle base, and we're just going to work towards along. So click tab A U, and we're just going to work around all of these. And as usual, you'll understand why, if you don't already, when we get to the next step. Work on this one then? Yeah. And now we're going to the shading tab, and nothing will change initially. Let's just move back to the viewport shading for speed. And at this point, I need you to have the Node Wrangler plugin, which if you don't have, it'll be under Get Extensions. And if you just type in Node Wrangler, as under add-ons, maybe it's default net. So I've got it. I think it might be a default setting. So I'm going to need you to have the Node Wrangler there's plenty of tutorials on how to install it if you don't have it. Mine is installed in add-ons. Give me a shout in the Discord if you need a hand adding that in. So with Node Wrangler enabled, I'm going to hit Shift and A. I'll go add in an image texture. Now I will link you something in the description that I've made, but I've got a stack of textures that I use for different things. So let's go for like scratches and deposits. And if I hit Control and Shift now, you'll see that we have this pattern that's replicated perfectly on everything, which isn't helping us. So we're going to use the same trick that we used here. So if we hit Control and T, we now make this mapping node. And if I change the value here, you can see that we can move the, I've already get some trippy effects. And if I plug in the random number from here into our location, now it's set it and it's put the scratches in different positions. Because these are a bit close together, I'm actually going to add an extra node in here called math. If we first type in I'm not sorry at all. Let's drag this out, type in math, and then we're looking for multiply. And then that value we're going to plug into our location again. And then if we change this, we should be able to like change the variation around a bit. Okay, nice. So now if I click back on our mix shader, nothing's going to happen until we connect this to the roughness. And at the moment, that's making everything super shiny. So we're going to connect one of my favorite nodes again, the color ramp. And if we now Control Shift on this, at the moment, everything that is black is super shiny. So we actually want to swap these around. So we're going to make the bulk of the material quite rough. And then we're just going to pull these down so that we have some shiny scratches in, like the surface has been worn away. If we now click on this, you can see we have these scratches. Now, this is where it's up to your judgment about like how shiny you want things to be. So if you want this to be shinier, you can make this more of a grey colour. And let's go back to a proper render view. That's looking better. Maybe you want the scratches to be more subtle, so we'll make less shiny, so just get the impression of it. And we can move it on there. So it's just these like little imperfections. And I want to barely be able to see it, just these like little marks here and there, which just make things feel a bit more photorealistic. So I think we're good. So the only thing left to do now is to actually render out our animation. I think add-ons would just like to make this a little bit shinier. Looking at it again. So we're just going to pull this down a bit. Maybe something like this. And you can play around with all of these until you get the values. So maybe something like this. Okay, so let's see where we're at. So I think I'd also like to add another effect to this. Okay, my computer can obviously not run this at a decent rendered speed. I'd like it to like light up each section as it rises up and then dim the light as it drops down. I think it could be an interesting effect. So again, you might decide that you're happy with what we've got already. Let's keep going, adding some bits in, see what we get to. So we are going to select this object and we're going to choose this face here. So Control Shift to the end. And we're going to hit P to, Shift and D to duplicate it, and then Escape to return it to its original position, and then hit P to separate selection. So now we have this extra element, and we're going to pull this down. And I actually want to make this a bit thinner, I think. So I'm going to use the backslash key to go to solo edit mode. Control and R to put a loop cut in, and then we're going to bevel it. So we're going to make something maybe that width. And then we're going to select invert and hit X to delete. So I didn't know. Make sure we're in face mode, that's all right. We're going to hit select to invert, and then we're going to delete faces. So it's just going to leave us this kind of thinner snake. And we're going to move this up it kind of sits beneath like that. And then what I want to do is create an array. So that we're going to duplicate another 20 objects. So you know the drill by now, we're going to set that to 1. And we're going to pull this back so that it sits kind of in the middle again. And then set this to 20. So you'll see that we've actually got our offset too far because it's not, so I think let's try 0.26. That's 2.25. So it's 0.255. That's kind of close enough, I think. And then we're going to use the same trick as before. So we're going to apply the array. And annoyingly, it's stretched everything out again. So if we now just scale it on Y, just pull them back until everything's kind of sat roughly inside its own shape. And you'll see, you kind of already see what the problem is. We have an animation set to this, but it's not following everything else. So before we separate these out, I'm going to select all of these and hit X to delete the keyframes. So now our light sources should stay in the middle. Then if we just move the playhead back to here, and then we're going to select these, just pull them down to the first one. Then we are going to go into edit mode, hit A to select everything, and then separate by loose parts again. In fact, before we do that, let's name it so that we don't. So F2 to name it. And then we're going to do the same thing. So separate into parts, and then each of these are separate objects. So if we now play it back, you'll see that they don't move with the panels. And the easiest way to do that is to parent them. So we'll select this one, and then hit Control P, Object, Keep Transform. If we play it back now, we have a strip line inside. Okay, so let's move into the side view, and we're going to wireframe. This is more confusing. Why is this more confusing? Okay, maybe we won't go to wireframe mode. I think because the object is curved, it's hard to know. So I just want to go through and just move these so that they're all sat inside. And again, it doesn't have to be super accurate. So we're just going to work our way through and pull these down so they're sat just beneath there. And some of these are now just how it's made the array. So we're just going to fix these problems first. Now, if you were sensible, you would have made this at the start, and then when you made your array, this is why sometimes it's a good idea to plan ahead more and not make stuff as we go on. So, we're all learning here. So we're going to just position these. Just take your time and go through and get these to where you want them to be. Go on the length. So actually we are somehow unsure. Okay, I think this will be close enough to give us what we want. Well, yeah, you can see they're not super even. I think that matters. Okay, so now we need to just go through and select the curve first, and then the panel, and then Control and P objects. And make sure you use Keep Transform. So we just go through and do each of these. And initially I could have done all of this at the start. If I was working on my own projects, I would have done, but I want to show you each step so that you can make decisions about what works for your design, and you know how to do it next time. paints, just make sure you're into the right one. Okay, if we play it back, they should all follow. Let's see. So it's not super exciting at the moment. Let's put an emissive light source in. So let's go into our shading view, and we're going to go to material, and we're going to remove the one we have on there and make a new one. So dead easy. We want to go to emission down here. Let's set this to like 20 and give it maybe a slightly blue tint. And look at that, we've got cool effects going on. So we'll just name this light source. And then if we select all of these, then go back to our original, and then we can hit Control and L and link materials, and it should apply to everything. So again, some interesting effects, and you might decide that that's exactly what you want. Creates all sorts of crazy, cool strobing patterns. And if we go to compositing now, so if we choose use nodes, so this is going to apply an effect to our image after it's rendered. So we're going to Shift and A, and we're going to choose glare, change this to fog glow. I'll leave everything as it is, and if I now render this, I'm just going to tweak my settings so that this render doesn't take forever. So I'm going to limit the render time to 30 seconds for now. I hit render. Okay, so at the moment that glow is maybe a little bit intense. So we're just going to turn down in our compositing, or just take the strength down to like 5 and then render again. Turn down the emission strength. So we might do that in a bit. Let's go back to our layout. And if you're wondering where your lights have gone now, they are because they're parented, they're underneath each panel. So we'll select one now. See my material, let's try and drop this down to 10. I think that'll probably be a bit nicer when everything's in full flow. Okay, so what I want to do is animate this material as well, so that when the light is at the top, it's brightest, and then it's actually turned off most of the time. It's only when it's in motion that it's lit. So that animation, I want shading. This is kind of annoyingly fiddly. What we need to do is move our mouse to the bottom corner here, and then pull up another panel. Let's move this because we want to change this one to timeline. Yeah. What we can do is we can also animate any values on our objects the same way that we can animate the motion. So if we select this material here, and why can I not see our material? Let's go to view, frame all. There we go. So we can keyframe the strength value. So that's pretty easy to do. We're going to set it to 0, and then hit I to keyframe it. And then we know that 30 frames is at the highest point. So let's set the strength to, let's say 12. Then hit I, and then we know that at 70 it's kind of gone out, but I think I actually want it out to like 50. It's passed through the 0, so we're just going to hit it to I again. And you might have noticed an annoying problem here, and that's that every object is sharing the same material. And annoyingly, there is a way around it using some kind of complicated shader stuff, but for this tutorial, what we're going to now have to do is duplicate the material and then offset the animation again. But you know how to do this by now, so select the next light source along and duplicate the material, and then I'm going to hit A and just move it forward to Y5. And off we go again. So make sure you hit this button here to duplicate material, so it's completely new material. And now we should be able to check to see if these lights are coming on. So you can see on our first three, they're actually coming all in, and they're actually exactly what we want. So I'm just going to work our way through 115 and 20. Okay, so let's see what we've got. So we should have the lights kind of rippling in. Very nice. So there's one slight problem still to fix, and that is that because it's a looping animation, we also need to make sure that we've got the lights. Some of the lights should already be lit up when the sequence starts, otherwise the loop isn't perfect. To see it when we get to the end of this, it suddenly jumps off. So we just need to work out which of these lights. If we zoom out, the easiest way would be to maybe go from like the halfway point, or a little bit back. Let's start at 160. So we're just going to select all of these and then drop them in the 60. And then with that, I should just use the same copy and paste. So this will now be 65. $70. I need that right. There's 70. 75. 80. 75. 90. 95. And now it should be a perfect loop. So, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so all there's left to do now is to do a render. And I would suggest doing a test render to start with. So make sure that your frame start and end is set to 200. And I'm going to set the size of this to 32%. And I'm going to set the time limit to, let's go 10 seconds. And then if we go down to this output, normally I would render out as individual frames, just doing a test. So I'm going to set it to FFmpeg. And we need to give it a file name. So it already saves in a temp folder. It just take a moment to choose where you want it to save out to. And then if we hit render animation, so it's going to be a small size render, and it'll go set my height wrong here somewhere. You can't divide that by 32. So let's just make it 30%, see what happens. Yeah, that's now. And there we go. After 20 minutes of rendering, we have our little preview animation, and it's looking really good. Very happy with that. So a couple of little settings I'd like to turn on for the final render. I find things tend to look better if you've got motion blur turned on. Just makes things a bit more cinematic. And again, this is up to you really, if you want to add a bit of depth of field in there. So I find it's easier to set my depth of field using this viewpoint and turning on depth of field. And we'll go to our camera and turn depth of field down here. And then if we just bring down the f-stop slightly, and then like that, maybe like point behind. So this part is raised, closest to the camera, it's nice and sharp. And it's just a subtle effect, but. And then set your final render setting, so back to 100. And you can set your frame rate. I leave mine at 24 for this. And then it's up to you. Unfortunately, this is going to take a long time to render, but the good news is I'm going to make a video to follow this one up, talking about how I render out big 4K projects for clients relatively quickly and how it's going to save you a lot of time and hassle. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. More to come. And if you don't want to miss the next tutorial, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. It really helps me out. I'm on the road to 1,000 people. I'd love to get there soon. Speak to you soon.